Good morning, Kindle Kids, and this is Thursday, March 18th, and today I want to talk to you about this day in history, one of my absolute favorite subjects, space, the final frontier. This day in history in 1965, the first human was in space on the first spacewalk, actually leaving their capsule out into the void of space. The first person out in space was actually a Soviet by the name of Alexei Leonov, and he was on his mission with his partner, Pavel, and I'm going to mess this up, Belayev. Ooh, tough one. The two were actually on a mission with their capsule called the Voskhod 2, and you can see how incredibly tight the quarters were here. So that was kind of like the first challenge of the mission. And I want to tell you about this because this is honestly something straight out of a movie, because they ended up having to shave a ton of weight on this mission to make sure things would work properly with two cosmonauts this time. And they ended up getting rid of the ejection seats, so they couldn't really scrap the mission in the first 2 minutes, which was kind of the most dangerous part of the flight. They finally got up into space, into orbit, and were able to achieve that. And then they had to attach an inflatable airlock. And then the problem started right here. So Alexei's outside of the spacecraft, the capsule, in his cosmonaut spacesuit when, guess what? The vacuum of space kicks in. And that actually isn't the vacuum like a vacuum cleaner. The fact that there's no atmosphere out in space means that basically the open space kind of sucks at you and caused his spacesuit to puff up like a Stay Puft Marshmallow Man. So now here's Alexei stuck out in space with a puffed up spacesuit, and he can't fit back inside of the airlock. So he ended up having to actually vent his spacesuit by opening the cuff and letting the oxygen out of his suit so that he could deflate and get back in the airlock. So that was terrifying in itself, because obviously things could go very wrong with that. But they didn't. He ended up getting himself and wriggling back into the airlock. But the process was so stressful and so difficult because his spacesuit was so puffed up that he ended up sweating a ton and getting himself to the point of near heat stroke in the process. So there was a danger right there. He finally got himself back in, and they came down into reentry. And actually, during the whole process, the manual reentry program messed up. So they had to, the automatic reentry program messed up. They had to do it manually. So they were way off course. They had to rotate around a second time in orbit and kind of mess up their entire mission. And they came down in the Ural Forest in Russia, which, if you don't know anything about it, it's cold. I mean, it's really, really cold. So they came down in negative 13-degree weather. This is before GPS, so they had no way of really communicating exactly where they were. So it took the Russian government about 24 hours to locate them. So they ended up having to do this mission. They stayed overnight in a freezing forest, were very worried about the real threat of wolves coming after them, which is a really crazy thing to talk about. And then the rescue team couldn't even get all that close. They had to come in about 4 or 5 miles away from the crash site and then ski their way in to rescue the cosmonauts. So really a wild and crazy mission. Apparently it was so stressful, and there was so much heat built up inside of the suits from the cosmonauts moving around that at least Alexei was known to have lost about 13 pounds on the mission. So that's just how much work these guys had to go through to be the first. Pretty nuts. Because of all of these problems, they actually scrapped the Voskhod design, ended up making the very next year the Soyuz rocket, which is actually still in use today. That's what we actually use to put a lot of stuff up to the International Space Station today. So that's pretty wild. And another really cool and fun fact is that recently one of the Voskhod capsules actually sold at a New York City auction for $2.9 million. I don't know who's got that in their house as a showpiece, but it cost them a pretty penny for sure. So knowing all of that crazy information and that story that really should become a movie, let's put our hands over our heart, find the flag in the room, and please rise for the flag salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please be seated. All right, Kendall Kids, let's talk a little bit about that food for today. Well, today we have a turkey sandwich, along with chicken nuggets with roll, whipped potatoes, broccoli, mandarin oranges, and milk. Well, you're going to be asking me what's going on with the weather, Mr. King. Well, you know what? Just like you can see just by looking out the window, it's wet out there today. And it's going to stay wet out for the most part. It's relatively cool today at a high of 41. It's not that uncomfortable, but that rain is going to continue to come down. And then I would expect a little bit of wind tonight because we're going to get a pretty good temperature drop with tomorrow being a high of only 36 degrees. But guess what? It is a much sunnier forecast, a much drier forecast through the rest of this week and into early next week. And then over the weekend, we've got that beautiful weather coming in the 50s and even into Monday with probably the very best day on the forecast in the near future. But why is it going to stay so wet? Well, you can see right here that we have a very large rainstorm coming all the way up from kind of the middle of the U.S. right there. And it is going to trend right up across us for the majority of the day. So we're very, very likely to see a fair amount of rain throughout the day. What does that mean for you? Well, I guess it just means that we are probably not going to be able to get outside today because it's just going to be that much of kind of a constant drizzle through the day. So I'm going to say it's unlikely we're going to be outside for recess, just calling that right now. But if there's a break in the weather, who knows? All right. So let's finish up with that Kendall mission statement. The mission of the Kendall Central School District is to provide the knowledge, skills, values, and attitudes needed by students to live responsibly and to compete successfully in today's and tomorrow's world. Well, I hope you guys have a fantastic Thursday. And if I don't get a chance to see you, remember to stay colorful, Kendall.